Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into something that's incredibly complex and frankly moving incredibly fast.
Yeah, it really is.
We're talking about the current overt conflict between Israel and Iran. We've gathered a ton of material, articles, research, our own notes, just trying to give you the clearest picture we can.
hmm
Okay, let's unpack this.
Absolutely. And our mission here really is to boil it all down, to pull out the most vital bits of information, the key insights, basically offer you a shortcut to getting properly informed on this.
Right, cut through the noise.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here, I think, is the goal isn't just lifting facts. It's about showing different angles, maybe sparking some aha moments for you.
Connecting the dots.
Connecting the dots, yeah, without, just drowning you in data.
Okay, so to really get where we are right now, today, we kind of have to look back, don't we? This tension, it's got history. It's not a new conflict, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. Not new at all. I mean, the hostility, it goes way back. But the huge shift, the one that really defines the modern era, was after the 1979 Iranian Revolution.
Right.
Before 79, Iran, under the Shah, was actually, well, sort of friendly with Israel, cooperated even.
Really? That's hard to imagine now.
It is. But the revolution completely flipped that script. Iran became, fiercely anti-Israel, started backing groups like Hezbollah, Hamas.
The proxies we hear so much about.
Exactly. And the rhetoric became extremely hostile. It's a fundamental change, shifting from sort of national interest to this ideological fight against Israel. That really laid the groundwork for the decades of shadow war.
Right, the shadow war. So for a long time, this wasn't direct fighting then. It was happening sort of under the radar. What did that look like?
For decades, yeah, it was mostly fought indirectly through these proxies. Iran funding and arming militants in Lebanon, Gaza, Syria, Iraq.
Yemen surrounding Israel, essentially.
Right. And it led to all sorts of covert stuff. Skirmishes, targeted assassinations, cyber attacks. It was this long, undeclared conflict simmering just below the surface.
So indirect confrontations mostly. What kept it from boiling over into, full-blown war back then?
Well, it seems like there was a kind of mutual understanding. Deterrence played a big part. Both sides probably wanted to avoid a direct all-out conflict with unpredictable consequences. So they stuck to the shadows mostly.
But obviously something changed. That lid came off. The shift from shadow to, well, glaring daylight has been incredibly fast, hasn't it?
It really has. It's quite stunning when you list the key moments. Things got really interesting and much more dangerous.
Where did that acceleration really start?
You could argue it really kicked into high gear on October 7th, 2023. Hamas's attack on Israel, that immediately put a massive spotlight on Iran's proxies.
Increased scrutiny everywhere.
Everywhere, exactly.
Yeah.
Then fast forward to April 1st, 2024. You have the alleged Israeli strike in Damascus, targeted Iran's Quds force, killed senior IRGC commanders.
IRGC being the Revolutionary Guard Corps.
That's right, a very powerful arm of the Iranian state. And that strike was a major escalation. So Iran retaliated directly for really the first time on a large scale, April 13th, 2024.
Operation True Promise, they called it.
Operation True Promise, yeah. Drones, ballistic missiles fired at Israeli territory. That was a huge step. And it didn't stop there. October 1st, 2024, Iran launched Operation True Promise 2S.
Part 2.
Right, a record number, something like 200 missiles fired at Israel. This was apparently in response to more assassinations linked to its proxies, just back and forth, escalating each time.
When you lay out those dates, like that October 23, April 24, October 24, what stands out to you about just how quickly this whole thing ramped up?
It's breathtaking, really. The speed. Going from decades of indirect fighting to multiple direct state-on-state attacks within roughly a year, that's unprecedented for Israel and Iran. The old rules just seem to evaporate.
Completely rewritten.
Seems like it.
And that brings us pretty much up to date, because now, here we are, June 19th, 2025. And we're not talking retaliation anymore, are we? We're talking about direct, overt war. What were the moments that really crossed that final line?
Yeah, the language has definitely shifted. The key turning point into what people are calling open warfare was probably June 13th, 2025, just last week.
Okay, what happened then?
That's when Israel launched Operation Rising Lion. This wasn't just a retaliatory strike. It looked like a full-scale offensive.
Wow.
Large-scale airstrikes, drone attacks, hitting over 100 sites inside Iran. And the targets were strategic. nuclear facilities, military bases, energy infrastructure, even things tied to the regime itself.
So going after the core capabilities.
Exactly. And reports indicate they killed several top IRGC commanders and significantly some nuclear scientists as well.
A major blow.
A very major blow. And Iran's response came quickly. As of today, June 19th, we're seeing Iran retaliate directly again. Missile strikes, drones.
And that's where the hospital attack comes in.
Yes, tragically. A Sigil ballistic missile hit Beersheba's Soroka Hospital. Reports say severe damage, dozens injured. That happened today. It highlights just how immediate and dangerous this all is.
Just incredible. So with strikes hitting hospitals, infrastructure, what does this mean for people actually living there? And what are the strategic aims now? Are they clear?
It's devastating for civilians, obviously. As for aims, well, Israel's stated goal with Rising Lion seems pretty clear. They want to dismantle, or at least severely degrade, Iran's nuclear program and its long-range missile capabilities. They're hitting military targets, but also symbols of the regime's power.
Okay. And Iran's aim in return?
Iran is hitting back, striking Israeli infrastructure like we saw with the hospital. But there's a sense maybe that they're trying to be somewhat careful.
Careful? How so when they're hitting hospitals?
Well, careful in the sense that they likely want to avoid provoking a massive direct intervention from the United States. It's a balancing act. They want to show resolve, inflict pain, but maybe avoid crossing a line that triggers a much wider war involving the U.S.
So calculated risks on both sides. It doesn't sound like miscalculation then, more like deliberate escalation.
The sources seem to suggest these are deliberate, albeit incredibly high-stakes moves. Both sides are pushing boundaries, testing red lines, trying to establish new levels of deterrence, perhaps.
Okay, inside Iran, then. How are they coping with these direct hits on their own soil? Major infrastructure, commanders. What's the picture domestically?
It's grim. Reports suggest this is Iran's worst crisis, certainly domestically, since the Iran-Iraq War back in the 1980s.
Wow.
Yeah. Civilian casualties, serious damage to infrastructure, significant losses in military and scientific leadership. It's taking a heavy toll.
Is there any sense this could destabilize the regime itself?
That's the big question, isn't it? But most analysts looking at the sources seem to think a full regime collapse isn't likely right now.
Why not?
Mainly because the state maintains very tight political and security control. They seem able, at least for now, to absorb these shocks and suppress widespread dissent, even with the population suffering.
Right. Okay, so this is obviously huge for Israel and Iran, but the ripples go much wider. What about the international reaction? How's the rest of the world handling this?
It's definitely got the world's attention. And the reactions are, well, complex. You got the U.S., which is providing support to Israel, military and diplomatic, but also watching very closely, probably trying to avoid getting dragged in deeper if they can help it.
In Europe.
Key European powers, like the UK and Germany, they're really pushing hard for de-escalation. Lots of diplomatic calls, statements, urging restraint.
What about the neighbors, the Arab Gulf states?
They're watching very nervously. It's complicated for them. Some might quietly see a strategic upside if Iran is weakened.
Right.
But mostly, they fear this spiraling out of control and engulfing the whole region in a much bigger conflict, which would be disastrous for them.
And powers like China and Russia.
They're largely calling for political solutions, ceasefires, dialogue, positioning themselves perhaps as mediators, but mainly opposing unilateral military actions and pushing for stability, likely for their own economic and strategic reasons.
So lots of different reactions. Why should you, listening to this, care about what, say, Germany or China thinks? How does it affect anything?
Oh, you should definitely care.
Yeah.
Because these international dynamics are crucial. They influence whether this conflict stays contained between Israel and Iran or if it blows up into something much bigger.
Like a regional war.
Exactly, or worse. The actions or inactions of these global powers directly impact things like global energy prices. Think oil and gas. They impact trade routes, international security alliances.
So economic impacts, security impacts.
Absolutely. A major war in the Middle East involving Iran has massive consequences for global stability and the global economy. It affects everyone, not just the people directly involved.
Okay, looking ahead then, what are the biggest risks we're facing now? And are there any potential ways out of this? Any pathways being discussed?
Well, the immediate risk is further escalation. If the strikes broaden significantly, imagine, say, the U.S. getting directly involved and hitting heavily fortified sites like Fordo, Iran's underground nuclear facility.
That would be huge.
Huge. It could trigger a massive regional conflict, potentially involving Hezbollah, other proxies, maybe even drawing in other countries. And the shock to energy markets would be immense.
So Escalation is risk number one. What else?
There's the whole question of the outcome for the Iranian regime.
Hmm.
Israel might hope these strikes lead to regime change, but as we said, analysts are skeptical.
Hmm.
It's possible Iran just becomes more hardline, more isolated,
Right.
or perhaps under enough pressure, maybe some kind of diplomatic off-ramp appears. That's the hope, anyway.
And the human cost.
That's a critical risk that's already a reality. Attacks on civilian infrastructure, hospitals, power grids, homes, it's already happening. This raises huge concerns under international law, humanitarian concerns. The suffering is immense.
Is there any talk of resolution? Any deals being floated?
Experts are speculating. Some suggest that under this kind of intense pressure, Iran might eventually be willing to make concessions on its nuclear program in exchange for something.
Like sanctions relief.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Sanctions relief, maybe enhanced inspections, some kind of broader diplomatic framework, possibly with U.S. involvement, mediation. Most agree that some kind of negotiated deal, however difficult, remains the least catastrophic way forward.
He's catastrophic. Not exactly optimistic.
No, it's not. But that's the situation. And what's really crucial to grasp here, connecting all these threads, is this isn't the shadow war anymore. Not by a long shot.
Right.
It's overt. It's direct state-on-state warfare with strikes, casualties, and really profound strategic goals driving both sides. It's fundamentally changed the game in the Middle East.
So we've really seen how decades of this simmering hidden conflict have just exploded into open war. Huge military actions, devastating impacts inside both countries, and this really complex global reaction. It's a stark reminder, isn't it, of how quickly things can change and how wide the consequences can spread.
It truly is. Understanding this whole arc, from the '79 revolution through the shadow war to today's overt conflict, it's vital for seeing how history shapes the present.
Yeah.
And maybe this leaves you with something to think about. When we talk about the least catastrophic path in a situation like this, with direct, open warfare, what does that actually mean? And what role can diplomacy realistically play when tensions are this high, when it seems like the least likely option to succeed? With war fatigue likely setting in eventually and global economies on edge, diplomacy feels essential.
Even if it seems impossible right now.
Exactly. Even if it seems almost impossible. It's something to keep pondering. Always good to seek out those different viewpoints, dig deeper than the headlines. The full picture is always more complicated.